The date is August 9, 1974. The time, 11 a.m. Richard Milhouse Nixon becomes the first and only U.S. president to resign from office. The trigger, 2 years of the Watergate scandal. For 44 years, the general public, even some of America's most respected historians, believed Nixon was nothing more than an out-of-the-loop bystander. They thought he was a victim of overzealous aides who'd acted on their own, without his approval. But 2 bombshell documentary discoveries shatter that decades-old myth. 1. A 1974 declassified audio tape. The other, 2018 released FBI archives. Both prove, beyond any doubt, that Nixon was the mastermind behind the most famous conspiracy in American history. June 17, 1972. 5 men are arrested mid-crime. They're caught burglarizing and planting illegal wiretaps inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters, located in Washington, D.C.'s Watergate complex. Investigators tie the men to a secret team almost immediately, the Plumbers Unit. This clandestine group's sole job? Spy on Richard Nixon's political opponents. Nixon, at the time, is running for 1972 re-election. The scandal explodes into full public view in February 1973. The U.S. Senate creates the Ervin Commission, the special panel tasked exclusively with investigating illegal activities tied to Nixon's re-election campaign. Every piece of evidence presented here comes from official, publicly accessible sources, the U.S. National Archives, NARA, U.S. Senate reports, and declassified FBI records available via the FBI Vault online platform. For decades, the official and media-driven narrative painted Richard Nixon as an out-of-the-loop president. Even a victim of his own overzealous inner circle. The first push for this false story came directly from Nixon himself. On April 30, 1973, he addressed the nation on live television and stated flatly, "I am not involved in the Watergate cover-up. My aides acted without my authorization." Next, some of America's most respected historians cemented that lie as fact. Take Stephen Ambrose, a leading Nixon biographer, widely cited in classrooms and media. In his 1989 book *Nixon, The Triumph of a Politician*, he wrote that Nixon was a, quote, passive spectator of the conspiracy, a plot he claimed was actually run by Nixon's White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman and his top domestic advisor John Ehrlichman. This version of events was taught in American high schools and universities. It was repeated on every major news network. It stood unchallenged for nearly 30 years. The Nixon administration's April 30, 1973, national television statement repeated that firm claim, "I am not involved in the Watergate cover-up. My aides acted without my authorization." But U.S. National Archives, NARA Audio Tape 741-2, recorded on June 23, 1972, tells the exact opposite story. Richard Nixon explicitly orders his White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman on that tape to use the CIA to block the FBI's investigation into the Watergate burglary. That is direct, unassailable evidence of obstruction of justice. Historian Stephen Ambrose made another false claim in his 1989 book, Nixon was a passive spectator of the conspiracy, directed by Haldeman and Ehrlichman. But declassified FBI records, released to the public on July 18, 2018, directly contradict that assertion. Those FBI documents prove Richard Nixon personally ordered the creation of the Plumbers Unit in 1971. This is the exact clandestine team that gave birth to the entire Watergate scandal. And that's the detail that turns every accepted truth about Watergate on its head. Every claim made here is backed by official documents and sworn testimony, all fully accessible to the general public. The document confirms the core act of obstruction. NARA Audio Tape 741-2, recorded June 23, 1972, and declassified August 8, 1974, is the most famous piece of evidence against Nixon. Nixon directly orders H.R. Haldeman to deploy the CIA to pressure the FBI. The CIA will lie, the Watergate burglary is a national security issue. The order's sole purpose? Kill the FBI's investigation immediately. The document confirms Nixon's role as cover-up leader. The U.S. Senate's Ervin Commission filed its final official report on June 27, 1974. The report's formal, unanimous conclusion: Richard Nixon personally directed and coordinated the cover-up of the Watergate crimes. Timoinage? According to John Dean, Nixon's White House counsel, testifying under oath on June 25, 1973, before the Ervin Commission, Nixon discussed three specific cover-up tactics in explicit detail. First, destroying incriminating White House documents. Second, paying hush money to the 5 Watergate burglars. Third, burning sensitive papers in the Oval Office's fireplace. The document confirms Dean's sworn testimony. A second NARA audio tape, recorded March 27, 1973, captures Nixon and Dean negotiating a specific hush money payment. The agreed sum? $1 million, to be paid anonymously to the burglars through a network of middlemen. Timoinage? According to H.R. Haldeman, in his 1994 memoir *The Haldeman Diaries*, Nixon's first reaction to the burglary sets the entire cover-up in motion. The day after the break-in, June 18, 1972, Nixon does not demand an internal investigation to identify who went rogue. Instead, he summons Haldeman to the Oval Office and asks 2 immediate questions. What do we know about the burglary? And how do we cover it up to keep the trail from leading back to me? The document confirms Nixon's role as the conspiracy's architect. Declassified FBI records, released to the public via the FBI vault on July 18, 2018, prove Nixon personally signed off on the creation of the Plumbers Unit in 1971. That's the exact clandestine team that planned and executed the Watergate burglary. The most explosive revelation, confirmed by the 2018 FBI archives, is this. Richard Nixon was not just the coordinator of the post-burglary cover-up. He was the architect of the illegal activities that led directly to Watergate, starting in 1971. The year is 1971. The Pentagon Papers have just leaked to the press, exposing decades of government lies about the Vietnam War. Nixon orders the creation of the Plumbers Unit. The unit's explicit, top-secret mission? Hunt down government leakers. Spy on Nixon's political opponents. Dig up dirt to discredit anyone who threatens his re-election. No group of rogue advisors dreamed up this clandestine unit. The order came directly from the president. The 2018 declassified FBI documents leave no room for doubt. Nixon personally approved the Plumbers Unit's budget, its leadership, and its mandate to break laws to protect his administration. June 18, 1972. The day after the Watergate burglary. Nixon does not order an internal investigation to find out what went wrong. He does not fire anyone for overstepping bounds. He calls Haldeman into the Oval Office. His first priority? Covering up the link between the burglars, the Plumbers Unit, and the White House. Every single step of the conspiracy bears Nixon's signature. Creating the clandestine Plumbers Unit. Targeting the Democratic National Committee headquarters at Watergate. Covering up the burglary with hush money and destroyed documents. Obstructing the FBI's and Congress's investigations. Every step was ordered or directed by Richard Nixon. Every order came from the Oval Office. This is not just a story from the past. It sits at the very center of modern American political debate, a testament to its enduring historical weight. First, every modern presidential scandal references Watergate as the gold standard for executive misconduct. That includes Donald Trump's 2019 Ukraine scandal and the accompanying obstruction of justice accusations. It also includes debates over congressional oversight of presidential power, which trace directly back to the Ervin Commission's Watergate investigation. Second, new Nixon-era documents are still being declassified. The most recent batch was released in 2021 by the U.S. National Archives. Those records fuel ongoing debates about the limits of presidential power and the public's right to access information about executive misconduct. Third, one core question remains unanswered. When a president orders clandestine illegal operations, who holds them accountable? Every one of Nixon's top aides, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Dean, and others, testified under oath before the Ervin Commission. Many served prison time for their Watergate crimes. Nixon never faced trial. He resigned and was granted a full, unconditional pardon by his successor, Gerald Ford, just 1 month later. Watergate was not the work of overzealous rogue aides. It was a top-down operation, directed entirely by Richard Nixon. The timeline starts in 1971 with his order to create the Plumbers Unit. It ends in 1974 with his resignation to avoid impeachment. The 1974 and 2018 declassified archives have shattered the 40-year-old myth. Richard Nixon was never a passive spectator. He was the mastermind behind the most famous political conspiracy in American history. But here's the real question, buried under decades of official lies and selective memory. Have other U.S. presidents, before or after Nixon, used these exact same tactics, clandestine spy units, cover-ups, obstruction of justice? And are their records still locked away, hidden from the public, waiting for a future declassification to expose the truth? Subscribe to The Truth They Hide so you don't miss what comes next.